Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, March 2nd, 1943. Dawn, the heat came first. Always the heat. Major Garrett Aldridge stood in the pre-dawn darkness, watching welders shower sparks across the nose of a B-25 Mitchell bomber. The aircraft sat on the tarmac like a patient on an operating table. Mechanics swarmed around it, their torches casting orange light across aluminum skin. But this was no ordinary repair. Aldridge stepped closer, ran his hand along the metal, still warm from the welding. Where the bombardier's station used to be, where a man once sat cramped and cold dropping bombs from 10,000 feet, there was now something else entirely. 8 Browning .50 caliber machine guns, 4 on each side of the nose, welded into a fixed position, all pointing forward, all firing together. 8 guns that could each fire 800 rounds per minute. Do the math. That's over 6,000 rounds per minute, 100 rounds every second. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds designed to punch through steel plating and set fuel tanks ablaze. The bomber wasn't a bomber anymore. It was a flying gun platform, a predator, a weapon that defied every manual, every doctrine, every assumption about how aircraft fought ships. "Beautiful, isn't she?" The voice came from behind. Aldridge turned. Paul Morrison stood there, 52 years old, civilian clothes stained with grease and sweat, dark circles under his eyes that spoke of weeks without proper sleep. In his hands, a clipboard thick with calculations and diagrams. "Beautiful," Aldridge said. "Doc, she's a monster." Morrison smiled, not a happy smile, the kind of smile a man wears when he's created something he doesn't fully understand yet. "She's evolution, Hawk. Bombers fly high and miss. We've lost dozens of planes trying to hit moving ships from altitude, but if you fly into them..." He gestured at the guns. You don't need to aim, you just need to get close." Aldridge looked back at the aircraft. Someone had already painted a name on the nose, Vengeance, in blood-red letters. "Whose idea was that?" he asked. Morrison's smile faded. "Mine." There was a story there. Aldridge had heard pieces of it. Manila, December 1941. Morrison's wife and 2 children caught in the bombing when the Japanese invaded. Morrison arrived 3 days too late. Found what was left of his family in a mass grave. Some men broke from that kind of loss. Morrison channeled it. "How much ammunition?" Aldridge asked. "800 rounds per gun, 6,400 total. At full rate of fire, you'll empty the guns in 6 seconds. 6 seconds. But you won't fire continuously. Short bursts, 2-3 seconds each. That gives you maybe 4 or 5 attack runs before your Winchester." Aldridge did the mental calculation. 4 runs, 4 ships, if everything went perfectly. Nothing ever went perfectly. And the bombs? 2 500-pounders under the belly. Skip bombing technique. Come in low and fast, release at wave top level. The bombs skip across the water like stones on a pond. 1, 2, 3 bounces, then impact the hull below the waterline. "That's theory, Doc. Has anyone actually done this in combat?" Morrison's jaw tightened. "We're about to find out." Behind them, more B-25s sat in a row, 13 in total, all modified the same way. Vengeance, Hell's Gate, Iron Rain, Widowmaker, names painted by crews who understood exactly what these machines were designed to do. "MacArthur gave you one chance," Aldridge said quietly. "One mission to prove the concept. If this fails, I go home in disgrace, and we keep losing bombers to high-altitude attacks that can't hit anything smaller than an island." Morrison stepped closer, lowered his voice. "But it won't fail, Hawk. The math works, the physics work. The only variable is the men flying them." "No pressure, then. I wouldn't ask you to do this if I didn't believe in it." Aldridge looked at the older man, saw the desperation there, the need to make his family's death mean something, to turn grief into purpose, to prove that one man's obsession could change the course of a war. "I'll fly your monster, Doc," Aldridge said. "But if I die testing your theory, I'm haunting you," Morrison almost laughed. "Almost. Deal." Rabaul, New Britain. Same morning, same time, 2,000 kilometers to the northwest, Rear Admiral Takeshi Kurokawa stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the sun rise over 16 ships. 8 destroyers, 8 transports, arranged in perfect formation, cutting through calm water with the precision of a sword through silk. 46 successful convoy runs in the past 12 months. 46 times he had delivered troops and supplies through these waters. 46 times he had brought every ship home intact. Today would be number 47. The morning air was cool, rare for these latitudes. Kurokawa breathed it in, savored it. There were worse places to spend a war than on the bridge of a flagship, watching competent men execute their duties with discipline and honor. Behind him, his operations officer approached with the morning report. "All ships report ready, Admiral. Weather is favorable. We should reach Leh by early evening." Kurokawa nodded. "Excellent. Maintain current course and speed. Have the destroyers stay alert. American reconnaissance aircraft have been active in this area." "Yes, sir. Though I must note, we have not had significant air attacks on daylight convoys in over 3 months. "Because they learned their lesson," Kurokawa said. "High-altitude bombing against moving ships is futile. Their pilots are brave but poorly trained in anti-ship tactics. They waste their bombs on empty ocean while our gunners fill the sky with steel." He gestured toward the escort destroyers. Each one bristled with anti-aircraft guns. 25mm autocannons, 5-inch dual-purpose mounts. Together, the convoy carried over 100 anti-aircraft weapons. The Americans called it different names in their intelligence reports. The Japanese crews had their own term for it, the umbrella of steel, umbrella of fire enough guns into the sky and nothing could pass through. It was simple mathematics, simple doctrine, and it had worked flawlessly for months. "The umbrella has never failed us," the operations officer said, echoing Kurokawa's thoughts. "And it will not fail us today." On the destroyer Yukikaze, positioned at the head of the convoy, Captain Hiroshi Saito stood on his own bridge and watched dolphins race alongside the bow wave. "Good luck," the old sailors said. Dolphins meant safe passage. Saito was 42 years old, a career officer, 17 years in the Imperial Navy. He had seen war from the Java Sea to the Solomon Islands, lost friends to submarines, to aircraft, to accidents that had nothing to do with the enemy. But the convoy runs felt safe, routine, almost boring. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a letter, unfolded it carefully. His wife's handwriting. "My dearest Hiroshi, Kenji took his first steps yesterday. I wish you could have seen it. He stumbled toward your photograph on the shelf. I think he knows your face, even though you have been gone so long. Please finish your 50th run soon. Come home. We miss you. 50th run." Saito looked out at the calm sea. 47 today, 48 next week, 49 the week after, then rotation, back to Yokosuka, back to his wife and little Kenji, back to a world where the only thing that mattered was watching his son grow. He folded the letter, tucked it carefully back into his pocket, turned to his gunnery officer. "Are the 25mm mounts fully manned?" "Yes, Captain. All crews are at their stations." "Good. Keep them alert. Just because we have not been attacked does not mean we will not be." The gunnery officer smiled. "Captain, if the Americans come, they will regret it. We have drilled our crews to perfection. The umbrella of steel will protect us." Saito nodded, looked back at the dolphins. "Just 3 more. After this one. Port Moresby. Afternoon." The test flight was scheduled for 1400 hours, 2 p.m. in civilian terms, but there were no civilians here. Only men preparing to do something that had never been done before. Aldridge stood next to Vengeance, running through the pre-flight checklist for the third time. Old habit. Check everything twice. Assume nothing. Morrison climbed into the co-pilot seat without being invited. "You're not authorized to fly in combat aircraft, Doc. This isn't combat, it's a test, and I need to see if my calculations are correct." Aldridge looked at the older man, saw the determination there, the need to witness his own creation in action. "If we crash, I'm blaming you. If we crash, Hawk, blame won't matter much." They took off at 14:05, climbed to 5,000 feet, then descended rapidly. Morrison had his eyes glued to the altimeter. "Lower," he said. Aldridge pushed the stick forward. 3,000 feet, 2,000. "Lower, 1,000 feet, 500. Lower, Hawk, we need to test this at operational altitude." Aldridge gritted his teeth, pushed lower. The ocean rushed up to meet them. 300 feet, 200. "Lower." "Doc, if I go any lower, we're swimming." 50 feet, Hawk. That's the operational altitude, 50 feet above the waves. Aldridge had flown low before, strafing runs against Japanese positions. But never this low, never in a fully loaded bomber with 8 machine guns throwing off the weight distribution. He dropped to 50 feet. The ocean became a blur. The propellers kicked up spray that misted the windscreen. One wrong move, one gust of wind, and they would auger straight into the Pacific. "See that?" Morrison pointed ahead. A derelict barge floated in the water, left over from some abandoned construction project, rusted, forgotten, about the size of a small destroyer. "That's our target." Aldridge lined up the approach, hands steady on the stick, thumbs hovering over the gun triggers. "Remember," Morrison said, "short burst, 2 seconds, let's see what she can do." Aldridge squeezed the triggers. The world exploded in sound and fury. 8 50 caliber machine guns erupted simultaneously. The noise was beyond deafening. It was physical, a hammering pressure that pushed against his chest and vibrated through his bones. Tracers streaked out in perfect lines. 8 rivers of red light converging on a single point. The barge didn't just get hit, it got obliterated. In 2 seconds, over 1,300 rounds slammed into rusted steel. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds designed to punch through ship armor and ignite anything flammable on the other side. The barge came apart, not slowly, not gradually. It simply disintegrated. Chunks of metal flew in every direction. A hole appeared in the center, widening with each fraction of a second. By the time Aldridge released the triggers, the barge had been cut in half, literally sawed in two. The pieces drifted apart, sinking slowly into the blue Pacific. Aldridge pulled up, climbed back to altitude. His hands were shaking. "Jesus Christ, Doc." Morrison stared down at the wreckage. His face was pale. "That's what happens to a destroyer," he said quietly. "That's what happens to men standing on the deck." They flew back in silence. When they landed, Aldridge shut down the engines and sat in the cockpit for a long moment, just breathing, trying to process what he had just witnessed. Morrison climbed out first, stood on the tarmac. Other pilots and ground crew had gathered, waiting for the report. Lieutenant Elias Brennan pushed through the crowd, 29 years old, fresh face. Brennan had been in country for 6 months. Good pilot, still asked questions that veterans had stopped asking. "How did it go, sir?" Aldridge climbed down. His legs felt unsteady. "It worked. Good. So we can—" "Brennan!" Aldridge's voice was harder than he intended. "We just sawed a barge in half in 2 seconds. A barge the size of a destroyer. Do you understand what that means?" Brennan's enthusiasm faded. "We can sink enemy ships?" "No." Aldridge looked at Morrison, then back at Brennan. "We can tear them apart. There's a difference between sinking and destroying. We just proved we can destroy." Morrison walked away. Didn't say anything, didn't need to. Brennan watched him go. Sir, I don't understand. Isn't this a good thing? We can finally hit back at the convoy runs, stop them from reinforcing. It's efficient, Lieutenant, whether it's good or not. Aldridge paused. I haven't decided yet. That night, Aldridge couldn't sleep. Kept seeing the barge come apart. Kept imagining what would happen when it wasn't a piece of rusted metal, when it was a ship full of men. Men who were someone's husband, someone's father, someone's son. Men like him. He finally gave up on sleep. Walked through the humid night to Morrison's workshop. Found the older man still awake. Still working. Always working. Can't sleep either? Morrison asked without looking up. Saw that barge break apart every time I close my eyes. Imagine how I feel. I designed the weapon. You just pulled the trigger. Aldridge sat down on a workbench. Why are you doing this, Doc? And don't give me the speech about innovation or saving Allied lives. Why, really? Morrison set down his tools, looked at Aldridge with eyes that held too much pain. Because they killed my family, Hawk. Emma was 34, Sarah was 8, Michael was 6. They died because Japanese bombers were efficient at killing civilians. His voice was steady, cold. So I built something efficient at killing them back, an eye for an eye. That's revenge, not justice. Yea, I don't care about justice. Justice doesn't bring my children back. Morrison picked up his tools again. But this weapon will stop convoys. It will save Marines who are starving on Guadalcanal. It will shorten the war. And yes, it will kill the men who serve the empire that murdered my family. All of that is true at the same time. And which reason lets you sleep at night? Morrison didn't answer, which was answer enough. MacArthur gave you one chance, Aldridge said. Tomorrow. One mission to prove the concept works in combat. If it fails, it won't fail. The math is sound. The weapon works. You saw it yourself. I saw it destroy an empty barge, Doc. That's not the same as attacking a convoy protected by 100 anti-aircraft guns with crews trained to shoot down bombers. Then fly low enough that they can't track you, fast enough that they can't react. Hit them before they understand what's happening. And after they understand? After the first ship goes down and the others know we're coming, Morrison met his eyes. Then you better make every burst count, Hawk, because you'll only get one surprise attack in this war. After tomorrow, they'll know what these gunships can do, so we make tomorrow count. Aldridge stood, headed for the door. Doc? Yeah? Does your math include how many ghosts a pilot can carry? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally said. That variable doesn't fit in any equation I know. March 3rd, 1943. 04:30 hours. Before dawn, the briefing room was packed. 13 bomber crews, 12 Beaufighter escort crews, all of them waiting. Aldridge stood at the front, next to a map of the Bismarck Sea. Gentlemen, we have a target. He pulled down the map overlay, showed the convoy route. 16 Japanese ships, 8 destroyers screening 8 transport, carrying 6,900 troops of the 51st Division. Destination, Leh. If they reach Leh, those troops reinforce the garrison. If they reinforce the garrison, our Marines die trying to take it. He paused. Let that sink in. Intelligence has given us the exact route, exact timing. We will intercept at 07:43 hours. We will attack from wave-top altitude, 50 feet above the water. We will destroy as many ships as possible using the gunship modification and skip bombing technique you've all trained for. A hand went up, one of the Beaufighter pilots. Sir, what about Japanese fighter cover? Aldridge glanced at Morrison, standing in the back of the room. Intelligence assures us that fighter cover will be minimal. He didn't mention the deception operation. The false intel that would send Japanese fighters 200 kilometers in the wrong direction. The men in this room didn't need to know that, didn't need to know that this wouldn't be a fair fight. War wasn't fair. Fair fights were for peacetime. Each B-25 is loaded with 6,400 rounds and two 500-pound bombs. At full rate of fire, your guns will be empty in 6 seconds, so you don't fire full rate. Short bursts, 2 to 3 seconds. That gives you 4 or 5 attack runs. Brennan raised his hand. Sir, what about lifeboats? Survivors? The room went quiet. Aldridge looked at the younger man, saw the question behind the question. Are we really going to kill men in the water? Your primary targets are enemy vessels. Focus on ships. If you encounter lifeboats... He paused, chose his words carefully. Use your judgment. That was the best he could do. Give them permission to be human while asking them to be weapons. Any other questions? Silence. Good. Takeoff is 0500. We fly low, we hit hard, we make this count. Dismissed. The crews filed out. Aldridge stayed behind. Morrison approached. Use your judgment? That's not a clear order, Hawk. It's the only order I can give, Doc. I'm asking these men to saw ships apart with machine gun fire. The least I can do is let them decide how much of their humanity they keep. Soft hearts lose wars. So do men who can't live with what they've done afterward. Morrison had no answer for that. 500 hours. The runway at Port Moresby was dark. 13 B25 gunships sat ready. Crews performed final checks by flashlight. Aldridge walked around Vengeance one last time, touched each of the 8 gun barrels, cold metal that would soon be hot enough to glow. Morrison appeared out of the darkness, carried a thermos. Coffee, black, like you like it. Aldridge took it. Thanks, Doc. Hawk, I need you to understand something. This weapon, these gunships, they're not just about revenge for me. They really can change the war. They can save lives. Whose lives? Ours or theirs? Does it matter? Yeah, Doc, it matters. Morrison looked old in the darkness, tired, like a man who had carried too much for too long. Bring her back, Hawk, the plane and yourself, preferably both. I'll do my best. They shook hands. Morrison's grip was firm. The grip of a man who needed to believe his creation was worth the cost. Aldridge climbed into the cockpit, strapped in, ran through the checklist one final time. All around him, engines coughed to life, 13 bombers rumbling in the darkness. He keyed the radio. All units, this is Vengeance Lead. We are go for takeoff. Maintain radio silence until target contact. Good hunting. One by one, the gunships rolled down the runway, lifted into the pre-dawn sky. Aldridge was last to take off, pushed the throttles forward, felt Vengeance surge down the runway and claw into the air. Below, Morrison stood and watched them disappear into the darkness. The flight to the intercept point took 2 hours and 13 minutes. Aldridge kept the formation low, 500 feet, low enough to stay under Japanese radar, high enough to avoid flying blind in the darkness. As the sun rose, he dropped lower, 300 feet, 200. The ocean appeared below, endless blue, empty, peaceful. Somewhere ahead, 16 Japanese ships were steaming toward Lai, confident, protected, certain that their umbrella of steel made them invincible. They had no idea what was coming. Aldridge checked his watch, 0730, 13 minutes to target. He descended to 50 feet. The ocean became a blur. Propeller spray misted the windscreen. The B-25 shuddered in the low-altitude turbulence. Aldridge's hands were steady on the controls. His mind was calm. This was the moment. Everything that came before, all the preparation, all the theory, all of Morrison's calculations, it all came down to the next 15 minutes. Vengeance Lead to all units. Targets should be visual in 5 minutes. Arm your weapons. Prepare to engage. Around him, 12 other B-25s descended to wave-top altitude. 12 other pilots armed their guns, 64 50-caliber machine guns, over 76,000 rounds of ammunition, 26 500-pound bombs, all pointed at 16 ships that didn't know they were already dead. Aldridge's radio crackled. Brennan's voice. "Lead, this is Hell's Gate. I have visual on Convoy, bearing 350, range 12,000 yards." Aldridge looked ahead, saw them. 16 grey shapes on the horizon, perfect formation, steaming north, beautiful, disciplined, doomed. "All units, this is Vengeance Lead. I have the target. Follow my approach. We go in fast, we go in low, and we don't stop until they're gone. Acknowledge." 12 voices acknowledged. Aldridge armed his guns, heard the electric motors whine as the weapons came to life. His thumbs rested on the triggers. 5,000 yards. He could see individual ships now, the destroyers in escort positions, the transports in the center. 3,000 yards. On the lead destroyer, a lookout finally saw them. Aldridge imagined the man's confusion. Aircraft approaching at 50 feet? Impossible. Had to be a mistake. 2,000 yards. Alarms started wailing across the Japanese convoy. Guns swiveled, but they swiveled upward, looking for high-altitude bombers. Looking at the wrong part of the sky, 1,000 yards. Aldridge centered the lead destroyer in his gun sight, Yukikaze, Captain Saito's ship. His fingers tightened on the triggers. "All units," he said quietly. "Engage at will." And he opened fire. 0743 hours. Bismarck, sea. The world became fire and steel. Aldridge squeezed the triggers and 8 50-caliber machine guns erupted in perfect synchronization. The sound was beyond anything he had experienced in 20 years of flying, not just loud, physical, a hammering percussion that made his teeth ache and his vision blur. The tracers reached out like fingers of red light, 8 streams converging on a single point, the lead destroyer, Yukikaze, Captain Saito's ship. At 50 feet altitude and 280 miles per hour, the distance closed in heartbeats. The Japanese gunners never had time to lower their weapons. They were still tracking the decoy B-17S at 10,000 feet, still firing upward, still believing the umbrella of steel would save them. They were looking at heaven when death came from the sea. Aldridge's first burst lasted 3 seconds, 2,400 rounds, armor-piercing incendiary, designed to punch through quarter-inch steel plate and ignite fuel and ammunition on the other side. The destroyer's bridge exploded, not from bombs, from bullets, glass shattered, metal buckled. Men simply ceased to exist in the spaces where the rounds passed through. Captain Hiroshi Saito was standing at the forward window when the first bullets arrived. He saw the red tracers an instant before they hit. His mind had just enough time to register impossible before the window became 1,000 flying shards. The rounds didn't just penetrate the bridge, they soared through it. Control panels erupted in sparks and flame. The helmsman was cut in half at the waist. The gunnery officer's head disappeared. The communications station became scrap metal in the space of 1 second. Saito felt something punch through his chest. No pain, just impact. Like being hit with a sledgehammer, he looked down, saw red spreading across his white uniform, the letter in his pocket, his wife, his son. Just 3 more runs, and I come home. His last thought was clear. "I'm sorry, Yuki. I counted wrong." Then the bridge filled with fire, and he thought nothing at all. Aldridge held the trigger for exactly 3 seconds. Released. The guns fell silent. Smoke poured from the 8 barrels. He thumbed the bomb release. 2 500-pound bombs dropped from the belly, fell toward the blue Pacific, hit the water, bounced. The skip bombing technique was brutally simple. Release the bomb at wave height. Let it skip across the surface like a stone on a pond. 1 bounce, 2 bounces, 3, then impact the ship below the waterline where armor was thinnest. The first bomb skipped 3 times and slammed into Yukikaze's portside amidships, punched through the thin hull plating, detonated in the engine room, 500 pounds of high explosive in an enclosed space filled with machinery and fuel lines. The destroyer lifted out of the water. The entire midsection bulged outward. Plates peeled back like opening a can. Steam and fire vomited from every opening. The second bomb hit 4 seconds later. Starboard side, forward magazine. This explosion was bigger. The bow section separated from the rest of the ship, just broke away. 300 tons of steel drifting free while the stern half began to sink. Aldridge pulled up hard, climbed through the column of black smoke boiling up from the wreck. Behind him, 11 more B25 gunships opened fire. The sound was like the end of the world. 96 machine guns firing simultaneously, over 16,000 rounds in the first minute. The air itself seemed to shred under the weight of so much metal moving so fast. The Japanese convoy dissolved into chaos. On the flagship's bridge, Rear Admiral Takeshi Kurokawa stood frozen. His brain could not process what his eyes were seeing. Aircraft at 50 feet. Impossible. Flying directly into the convoy. Impossible. Guns firing from the nose like machine gun nests. Impossible. Yukikaze breaking in half. Impossible. Every piece of doctrine, every training manual, every successful convoy he had commanded, all of it said this could not happen. But it was happening. "Admiral!" his operations officer was screaming. "Orders! We need orders!" Kurokawa's mouth moved, but no sound came out. His mind was trying to reconcile 2 realities. The world he understood, where bombers attacked from altitude and anti-aircraft fire stopped them, and this new world where aircraft became flying cannons that sawed ships apart from wave height. The 2 realities could not coexist, so his mind simply stopped processing. 15 seconds of paralysis, 15 seconds while his officers screamed for orders, 15 seconds while 3 more ships died. When Kurokawa finally spoke, his voice was a whisper. This is not in any manual. We have no doctrine for this. Admiral, please!" Another explosion. Another ship breaking apart. Kurokawa watched a transport erupt in flames, watched men jump overboard, watched the ocean catch fire. "Lower the guns," he said, still whispering. "Lower all guns. They are coming from the sea, not the sky. Tell all ships." But the order came too late. Much too late. 4 ships were already burning. The formation was breaking apart. The umbrella of steel was pointing the wrong direction, and more American gunships were diving in. Lieutenant Elias Brennan brought Hell's Gate in on the second wave. He had watched Aldridge's attack run, watched Yukikaze break apart, felt his stomach turn at the efficiency of it. But orders were orders. His target was the transport Shinano Maru, 6,900 tons, painted grey, loaded with 600 soldiers of the 51st Division, 600 men who had families, who wrote letters home, who wanted to survive the war and see their children grow up. Brennan pushed the thought away, focused on the mechanics, altitude 50 feet, airspeed 280, target bearing 355. His thumbs found the triggers. "God forgive me," he whispered, and fired. 8 streams of tracers walked across the transport's deck. Men were visible, running, trying to reach cover, trying to man the few anti-aircraft guns mounted on the superstructure. The 50 caliber rounds found them. Bodies came apart, not cleanly, not quickly. The armor-piercing incendiary rounds were designed to destroy machinery, not flesh. What they did to human bodies was something Brennan would see for the rest of his life. He held the trigger for 2 seconds. 1,600 rounds. The ship's bridge disintegrated. The forward gun mounts went silent. Smoke and fire poured from a dozen holes in the superstructure. He released the bombs. Skip, skip, skip. Impact. The explosion tore open the hull below the waterline. The sea poured in. The ship began to list immediately. Brennan pulled up, banked hard right, and saw something that would haunt him forever. The transport was sinking. Men were jumping overboard, some into lifeboats, most just into the water. They wore life jackets. They were following procedure. Abandon ship, wait for rescue. But fuel oil was leaking from the ruptured tanks, spreading across the water in a thick, black slick. And somewhere in that slick, a spark found vapor. The ocean caught fire. Not metaphorically, literally. The fuel oil ignited and flames raced across the surface. 60-foot walls of fire spreading in every direction. The men in the water started screaming. Brennan could hear them even over the roar of his engines, high-pitched, desperate, the sound of men burning alive. He watched one sailor try to swim away from the flames, watched the fire catch him anyway, watched him go under and not come back up, watched 20 others suffer the same fate. "Hell's Gate, this is Port Moresby Control," Morrison's voice on the radio, calm, clinical, coming from 200 miles away where he couldn't see the burning men. "We are monitoring your attack. Confirm all targets destroyed." Brennan's hands shook on the stick. "Control, this is Hell's Gate. Transport is sinking. I am breaking off." "Negative, Hell's Gate. Make another pass. Ensure complete destruction. Use remaining ammunition on lifeboats and survivors." The words hit Brennan like a physical blow. "Say again, Control." "Confirmed, Hell's Gate. Strafe survivors. Every soldier who reaches shore reinforces lay. Complete your mission." Brennan looked down. The ocean was a sea of fire. Men were dying in that fire, burning, drowning, screaming, and Morrison wanted him to add bullets to the horror. "Control, His voice cracked. "I can't. There are men in the water. They're already dying. I know what they are, Lieutenant." "Complete your mission. That is a direct order." Brennan saw a lifeboat, 20 men crammed into it, rowing desperately to escape the flames, young faces, terrified faces, faces that looked exactly like the faces of the men he flew with. Different uniforms, same fear, same humanity. His thumbs hovered over the triggers, one squeeze, 2 seconds of fire. The lifeboat would disintegrate, 20 men would die, 20 more ghosts. "Hell's Gate, do you copy? Complete your attack run." Brennan's vision blurred, from sweat, from tears, from the realization that war had finally asked him to do something he couldn't do. "I copy, Control." He banked away from the lifeboat. Let it go. "Hell's Gate, what is your status?" "Ammunition expended," Brennan lied. "Returning to base." He had 4,500 rounds left. More than enough to kill every man in that lifeboat, in 10 other lifeboats. But he was done watching men burn, done being the efficient killing machine Morrison had created, done. Aldridge heard the exchange on the radio. He was making his 3rd attack run, had already destroyed 2 ships. Was lining up on a 3rd destroyer when Brennan's voice stopped him. The fear in it. The revulsion. The sound of a man reaching his breaking point. Aldridge had a choice to make: enforce Morrison's order, demand that Brennan strafe the survivors, maintain discipline, complete the mission with maximum efficiency, or allow mercy. He keyed the radio. "All units, this is Vengeance Lead. Primary targets are enemy vessels. Focus on ships. Survivors are, secondary priority. Use your judgment." A pause. "Control, did you copy that?" Morrison's voice came back, harder now, angry. "Vengeance, Lee, those are not your orders to give." I said, "With respect, Control, you're 200 miles away. I'm the one watching men burn. My call." Silence on the radio, then Morrison's voice, quiet, almost defeated. "Understood, Lade. Your call." Aldridge didn't have time to think about what he had just done. Another destroyer was in his sights. Guns blazing, bombs away. The ship erupted in fire. The battle had become a nightmare choreography. Gunships diving from 50 feet, guns blazing, bombs skipping, ships exploding, the ocean turning black with oil and red with fire. The Japanese crews tried to fight back. Some guns managed to depress low enough to fire at the attackers. Tracers arced across the water. A few found their marks. One B-25 took rounds through the wing, started trailing smoke but stayed airborne. A Beaufighter got hit in the engine, went down hard, skipped across the water like its own bombs, broke apart, sank in seconds. But for every Allied aircraft hit, 3 more Japanese ships died. The math was brutal. The math was clear. Morrison's weapon worked exactly as designed. 52 hours, 9 minutes into the battle. On the flagship, Admiral Kurokawa finally understood. Too late. Far too late, but he understood. These were not bombers, not in any traditional sense. They were flying gun platforms, weapons that redefined what aircraft could do to ships. And his doctrine, his beloved umbrella of steel, was designed to stop the wrong kind of attack. High-altitude bombers that came from above, not flying cannons that came from the sea. "All ships," he said into the radio. His voice had changed, no longer uncertain, now calm. The calmness of a man who has accepted defeat. "Emergency scatter, break formation, take evasive." He stopped, looked up, saw a B-25 diving directly at his flagship, saw the 8 gun barrels pointing at him, saw death coming at 280 miles per hour. In that moment, Kurokawa's mind became perfectly clear. He understood what had happened. The Americans had innovated, had looked at the problem of attacking ships and found a new solution, had dared to try something no one had ever done before, while he, Kurokawa, had relied on doctrine, on tradition, on what had always worked before. And that was the difference between them: innovation versus tradition, evolution versus stasis, future versus past. "I was wrong," he said quietly to the empty bridge. "Everyone else was dead. The manual was wrong, all of it. We should have questioned everything, should have prepared for the impossible." The tracers grew brighter. "Tell Kenji." He thought of his grandson, 3 years old, would never know his grandfather. "Tell him that I died learning. Too late, but learning." He straightened his uniform, stood at attention. "The Americans won because they dared to change," he said. "We lost because we dared not to." The first rounds hit the bridge. Kurokawa felt something punch through his chest, felt the heat, felt his legs give way. He fell to his knees, then to his side. His last thought was crystal clear. Evolution always wins, always. Then fire filled the world, and he thought nothing at all. Aldridge pulled up from his 4th attack run and looked back. The flagship was breaking apart. Massive explosions tore through the hull as magazines detonated. The ship lifted partially out of the water, then crashed back down and began to sink. On what remained of the bridge, Aldridge saw something that made him pause. A body in an admiral's uniform, standing upright against the railing even as the ship tilted, arms at his sides, formal, dignified. The man hadn't run, hadn't tried to save himself, had just stood there, waiting until the ship tilted enough that the body fell into the flames. "He didn't run," Aldridge whispered. "He accepted it." For some reason, that made it worse. Not an evil man, just a man who believed in the wrong things, who trusted tradition when innovation was required. A man not unlike Morrison in his own way. Both believers, both certain of their methods, but only one had been willing to change. 7:58 hours, 15 minutes after first contact, Aldridge pulled up from his final attack run and climbed to 500 feet. Below him, the Bismarck Sea burned. 11 ships were gone, 7 transports, 4 destroyers, sunk or sinking or so badly damaged they would never make port. 4 more ships limped north, trailing smoke, listing, trying desperately to escape. The water was black with oil. The oil was on fire. Columns of smoke rose thousands of feet into the air. The smell of burning fuel and burning flesh carried on the wind. Bodies floated everywhere, hundreds of them, some still moving, most not. Lifeboats drifted among the wreckage. Some were burning, some held survivors who stared up at the circling aircraft with expressions beyond fear. Aldridge keyed the radio. "All units, this is Vengeance Lead. Cease fire. Repeat, cease fire. We are Winchester. Return to base." The guns fell silent. The sudden quiet was worse than the noise had been. Aldridge could hear the ocean, could hear the crackle of fires, could hear, faintly, the screams of wounded men. He made one more circle and saw something that changed everything. One of the damaged destroyers had stopped running, was actively pulling survivors from the water. Japanese sailors forming human chains, reaching into the burning oil slick, risking their own lives to save their comrades. Aldridge dropped lower, watched. A young Japanese sailor, couldn't have been more than 20, was pulling a burned man from the water. The survivor was screaming, burns across his back, oil in his hair, on his skin, everywhere, but the young sailor didn't let go. Pulled him up, held him gently, said something Aldridge couldn't hear, then lowered the body back into the water when he realized the man was dead. The young sailor looked up, made eye contact with Aldridge through the canopy. For one moment, 2 men from different worlds, different sides, different beliefs, looked at each other. The Japanese sailor's face was streaked with tears, oil, ash. His expression wasn't hatred, wasn't fear, just exhaustion. The kind that comes from trying to save lives in the middle of death. The same expression Aldridge saw in the mirror every morning. Aldridge raised his hand, not a salute, not a wave, just acknowledgement. The young sailor nodded back, then turned and pulled another body from the water. Aldridge climbed away. "They're not demons," he said quietly. They're just men, trying to survive, trying to save their friends, just like us." His hands tightened on the stick, and we sawed them apart like they were nothing. Port Moresby, 09. 30 hours. The landing was routine. Textbook. Aldridge brought Vengeance down smooth and easy, taxied to the parking area, shut down the engines. The sudden silence was deafening. Ground crews were celebrating, cheering. Intelligence had already radioed ahead with preliminary results. 11 ships destroyed. Massive victory. Proof that the gunship concept worked. Morrison was running across the tarmac. Aldridge sat in the cockpit, couldn't make himself move. His hands were still gripping the stick, white-knuckled, shaking. He could still see the destroyer breaking in half, could still see Captain Saito's bridge exploding, could still see men jumping into fire, could still see the young sailor pulling bodies from the water. That look of exhaustion, of shared humanity across enemy lines. "Hawk!" Morrison's voice, right outside the cockpit. Aldridge forced his hands to release the stick, forced himself to stand, forced his legs to carry him down the ladder. His boots hit the tarmac. Morrison grabbed his shoulders. "Hawk! You did it! You proved everything! The weapon works! The concept works! We can—" Aldridge pushed past him, walked 3 steps, bent over, and vomited onto the concrete. Everything in his stomach came up. Coffee, rations, bile. He heaved until there was nothing left and then heaved again. Morrison stood frozen. "Hawk, are you—" It worked, Doc." Aldridge wiped his mouth, straightened up. "Your weapon worked perfectly, exactly as designed. Too perfectly." "I don't understand." "We didn't fight today, we executed. We sawed men apart while they tried to follow their training that was obsolete the moment your weapon existed. Other crews were landing, climbing out of their aircraft, but there was no celebration among the pilots. They moved like sleepwalkers, hollow-eyed, silent. Hell's Gate touched down, taxied to a stop. The engines shut off. Brennan didn't climb out. Aldridge walked over, looked up into the cockpit. Brennan sat there, hands still on the controls, staring straight ahead at nothing. "Eli, it's over. We're home." No response. Aldridge climbed the ladder, reached into the cockpit, gently pulled Brennan's hands off the stick. "Come on, kid. Let's get you down." Brennan turned to look at him. His face was streaked with tears. "I disobeyed orders, sir. Morrison told me to strafe the lifeboats. I couldn't. I saw their faces and I couldn't. I know. You should court-martial me." "For what? For being human?" "I failed the mission." Yeah, Aldridge helped him out of the cockpit, got him down the ladder. "You did what I wanted to do, Eli. You just had more courage than me." Morrison approached, saw Brennan's face, saw the tears. "Lieutenant, did you complete your attack run?" Brennan looked at him. Something hard came into his eyes. "I destroyed my target, sir. The transport is sunk. Mission complete." "And the survivors?" "What about them, sir?" "I ordered you to strafe lifeboats to ensure no soldiers reached shore." Brennan stepped closer to Morrison, close enough that the older man had to look up slightly. "I'm a pilot, sir, not an executioner. There's a difference." The two men stared at each other. The celebration around them had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. Finally, Morrison stepped back. "Report to the medical officer, Lieutenant. You're grounded pending psychological evaluation." Brennan saluted, walked away without another word. Morrison turned to Aldridge. "We can't have pilots refusing orders in combat. We also can't have pilots who hunt survivors like animals. Where's the line, Doc?" "The line is victory. The line is ending this war as quickly as possible. The line is wherever we draw it," Aldridge interrupted. "And I'm drawing it at burning men who are already dying. We destroy ships, we kill soldiers in combat, but we don't add bullets to men who are already in hell." Morrison's face hardened. "You're getting soft, Hawk." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to keep enough of my soul that I can live with myself when this is over." He walked away, headed for the debriefing room. Behind him, Morrison stood alone on the tarmac, surrounded by celebrating ground crews, surrounded by proof that his weapon worked. But the pilots, the men who had actually used his weapon, they weren't celebrating. They stood in small groups, quiet, smoking cigarettes, staring at nothing, daring, looking like men who had just seen the future of warfare and found it horrifying. Rabaul, New Britain, March 7th, 1943. 4 days after the battle, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stood in the operations room and read the report for the 3rd time. It didn't get better with repetition. Convoy destroyed, 11 of 16 ships lost, estimated casualties 3,500. Cause: low-altitude gunship attack combined with skip bombing technique. No effective defense possible under current doctrine. The last line was the worst. No effective defense possible. Yamamoto set down the report, looked at his staff officers, saw fear in their eyes. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "we have been out-innovated." An operations officer spoke up. Admiral, this was an aberration. The convoy lacked fighter cover due to American deception, Yamamoto interrupted. They fed us false intelligence, lured our fighters away, then attacked a defenseless convoy with a weapon we didn't know existed. He picked up the report again. This was not luck. This was planning. This was evolution. What do we do, sir? Yamamoto walked to the window, looked out at the harbor where replacement ships were loading for the next convoy attempt. We adapt or we die. There is no third option. He turned back to his staff. New doctrine, effective immediately. No more daylight convoys, no more large formations. We move supplies at night, in small groups, using different routes each time. He paused. And we assume the Americans will continue to innovate, because they have learned the lesson we taught them at Pearl Harbor. What lesson, sir? That the future belongs to whoever adapts fastest. We adapted first. We struck Pearl Harbor with carrier aircraft when everyone said carriers couldn't project that kind of power. We proved them wrong. His voice was grim. Now the Americans have proven us wrong about bombers, and this is just the beginning. An aide entered, handed Yamamoto a folder. Salvaged personal effects from the flagship, sir. Admiral Kurokawa's belongings. Yamamoto opened the folder. Inside was a diary, water-stained, the last pages still legible. He read the final entry. March 2nd, 1943. Tomorrow we depart for Lai. My 47th convoy. The weather is good, the crews are ready, the umbrella of steel remains strong. After 50 runs, I will request rotation back to Yokosuka. I want to see my grandson Kenji before he forgets what his grandfather looks like. Just 3 more after this one. Then, home. Yamamoto closed the diary, set it gently on the desk. Admiral Kurokawa was a good officer, he said quietly. He believed in our doctrine. He followed the manual perfectly. And he died because the manual became obsolete overnight. Sir, that is the lesson, gentlemen. That is the... Kurokawa did everything right according to what we taught him, but right and wrong change faster than manuals can be rewritten. The Americans understood that. We did not. A second aide approached, handed him another folder. Intercepted personal mail, sir, from Captain Saito of the destroyer Yukikaze. Letter to his wife, written March 2nd, never sent. Yamamoto almost didn't open it, but duty demanded he know what his officers had been thinking in their final hours. He read, My dearest Yuki, this is my 47th run. After 50, they rotate me home. Just 3 more, my love, 3 more times, across the Bismarck Sea, and then I am yours forever. I will never leave again. I will watch Kenji grow. I will grow old with you. I will forget the war and remember only that I survived. Wait for me. I am almost home. Yamamoto folded the letter carefully. His hands were steady, but his eyes were not. Admiral Kurokawa, Captain Saito, both men counting down. Both men 3 runs short of rotation, 3 runs short of home, both dead in the first minutes of an attack they couldn't have imagined. Forward the letter to Captain Saito's widow, Yamamoto said quietly. She deserves to know his last thoughts were of her. He walked to the door, stopped, looked back. From now on, we must assume that everything we know is temporary. Every tactic, every doctrine, every assumption, the moment we become certain, we die. He gestured at the diary and letter. These men were certain, and certainty killed them faster than American bullets. Port Moresby, March 14th, 1943. 11 days after the battle, the nightmares came every night. Aldridge would close his eyes and be back in the cockpit, diving toward the convoy, squeezing the triggers, watching the destroyer break apart. But in the dreams, the ship didn't just break, it screamed, metal screaming, Men screaming, the ocean itself screaming. And when he pulled up, when he looked back, all the bodies floating in the water had faces he recognized. Brennan's face, Morrison's face, his own face. He woke up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, heart hammering. 3:14 in the morning, same time every night. He gave up on sleep, got dressed, walked through the base in the darkness, found himself at the gunship parking area. Vengeance sat there, dark and silent. The 8 gun barrels pointed at nothing. The 8 Someone had painted 11 small ship silhouettes below the cockpit. Kill marks, 11 ships in 15 minutes, a record that would probably never be broken. Aldridge reached up, touched the painted silhouettes. 11 ships, 3,500 men. His promotion to lieutenant colonel had come through. So had the Distinguished Service Cross. There had been a ceremony, photographs, congratulations. He accepted it all with appropriate responses, then returned to his quarters and stared at the medal for an hour, trying to understand what it represented. "Can't sleep either," Morrison's voice. The older man emerged from the shadows, looked even worse than Aldridge felt, thinner, greyer. "Bad dreams," Aldridge said. "Me too." Morrison stood next to him. Both men stared at the gunship. "MacArthur wants more, 50 more gunships. Says the concept is proven, says we can interdict every convoy route in the Pacific." "What did you tell him?" "I said yes. What else could I say?" They stood in silence. The tropical night pressed down on them. "I saw something," Aldridge said. After the battle, one of the damaged destroyers had stopped running, was pulling survivors from the water. Morrison looked at him. There was a young sailor, maybe 20. He was pulling burned men from the oil fires. One of them died in his arms, and he just gently lowered the body back into the water, then pulled another one out. Aldridge turned to Morrison. "He looked at me, Doc, made eye contact. And I saw the same thing in his eyes that I see in Brennan's eyes, in my eyes when I look in the mirror." "What did you see?" "Exhaustion. The kind that comes from trying to stay human in the middle of hell." Aldridge paused. "We didn't fight soldiers that day. We killed men who were just like us. Men trying to do their duty, men trying to save their friends." Morrison was quiet for a long time. "Does knowing that make it better or worse?" he finally asked. "Worse, because if they're just men, then what does that make us?" Neither of them had an answer for that. April 28, 1943. 8 weeks after the battle, the reconnaissance photographs arrived in a folder marked "Classified." Morrison spread them across his desk. 12 images, aerial views of the Bismarck Sea taken at different times over the past month. The first showed the immediate aftermath, ships burning, oil slicks spreading, debris fields stretching for miles. The second showed the same area 3 days later, most of the fires out, just wreckage and bodies. The third showed a week later. The bodies had sunk or been recovered, only wreckage remained. Morrison pulled out a magnifying glass, started examining the images closely. In the fourth photograph, he could make out individual pieces of debris, a lifeboat, part of a mast. What might have been a body? He started counting. 1, 2, 3. His office door opened. Aldridge walked in. "Don't," Aldridge said immediately. Morrison didn't stop. 4, 5, 6. "Doc, don't do this. I need to know. I need to count them." "Why?" Morrison looked up. His eyes were hollow. "Because I built the weapon. I calculated the firepower. I estimated the casualties, but estimates aren't real, Hawk. These are real." He gestured at the photographs. "Every one of these was a man, had a name, had a family, and I need to see what efficiency looks like." "You'll drive yourself mad." "Then at least I'll understand the cost." Aldridge walked over. took the magnifying glass, set it aside. The cost is already here, Doc. He pointed at Morrison's reflection in the window. Look at yourself. You've lost 20 pounds. You don't sleep. You jump at loud noises. That's the cost. Morrison slumped into his chair. I thought revenge would feel different, he said quietly. I thought killing the people who killed Emma and the kids would fix something, fill the hole. Did it? No, the hole is still there, but now it's filled with 3,500 more ghosts. An aide knocked on the door, entered with another folder. Sir, intelligence report on Japanese convoy activity. You asked to be notified of any changes. Morrison opened the folder, read. They've changed everything, he said. No more daylight convoys, no more large formations, night runs only, small groups, different routes every time. Your weapon scared them, Aldridge said. My weapon changed their entire doctrine overnight. Morrison set down the folder. We won, Hawk. The gunships work. Japan can't risk another Bismarck Sea, so they've adapted. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted revenge. I got evolution. Morrison looked at the photographs again. They're learning from us now, changing, adapting, just like we learned from Pearl Harbor. Then the war continues, just differently. Everything continues differently after this. Morrison stood, walked to the window. I changed warfare, Hawk, made it more efficient, but I didn't make it more humane. I just made us better at killing. He was quiet for a moment. When this is over, when the war ends, people will study what I built. They'll make it better, more efficient, more deadly, and they'll forget the cost. They'll just see innovation. What do you want them to see? Morrison thought about that. I want them to remember that every innovation has a price, not just in enemy lives, in the souls of the men who use it, in the certainty that once you create something, you can't uncreate it. He turned back to Aldridge. I want them to know that I killed 3,500 men to avenge my family, and I'd do it again. But I'd know going in that it wouldn't fix anything. It would just create more widows, more orphans, more pain. That's a hard lesson, Doc. Good, it should be hard. Easy lessons get forgotten. Brisbane, Australia, February 18th, 1954. 11 years after the battle, Paul Morrison woke at 3:14 in the morning. The time was significant, the same time he woke every night for the past 11 years, the same time the nightmares always found him. But tonight was different. Tonight his chest was tight, his left arm was numb. His breath came in short gasps. He knew what it was, sat up slowly, didn't call for help, didn't reach for the phone, just sat in the darkness and waited. Emma's photograph was on the nightstand. Sarah and Michael smiling beside her, all three gone 13 years now, all three the reason he had built the weapon. I avenged you, he whispered to the photograph. Built something that killed thousands, changed warfare forever, made the world more efficient at death. His chest tightened more, the pain spread. But you're still gone, and I'm still empty. He thought about the gunships, about Aldridge's face after the battle, about Brennan breaking, about 3,500 men whose deaths he owned, about the young Japanese sailor he'd heard about, the one Aldridge described, pulling bodies from burning water, trying to save lives in the middle of death. That sailor understood something I didn't, Morrison said to the darkness. That efficiency isn't the point. Humanity is, and I sacrificed humanity for efficiency. The pain became sharp, urgent. He reached for the phone. His hand stopped halfway. No, he said quietly, I'm done. I've carried this long enough. He lay back down, looked at Emma's photograph one final time. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry I couldn't bring you back. I'm sorry all I could do was destroy. I'm sorry I built something that made the world worse, not better. The pain intensified, his vision blurred. But I learned, Too late, but I learned. That's something, isn't it? The photograph didn't answer. Paul Morrison died at 3:14 in the morning, alone in his apartment in Brisbane, surrounded by blueprints for weapons he wished he'd never invented. His last conscious thought was of the young Japanese sailor, the one who had chosen to save lives instead of take them. That was the better choice, Morrison thought. I see that now. Then the pain became everything. And then nothing at all. They found him the next morning. Heart attack. Quick, the doctors said. Probably painless. They didn't see the letter on his desk, sealed in an envelope, addressed to whoever found the blueprints. The letter said, I made killing more efficient. But efficiency without humanity is just mathematics written in blood. I spent 11 years trying to justify what I built, trying to balance 3,500 deaths against the lives saved, trying to find an equation that made it acceptable. There is no such equation. If you use my designs, do it with full knowledge that you're trading pieces of your soul for tactical advantage. The weapon works, the math is sound, but the cost is paid in ghosts. I carried 3,500 of them. They never got lighter. I just got weaker. Learn from my mistake, or join me in carrying them to the grave. Cedar Rapids, Iowa, November 1953. 3 months before Morrison's death, Garrett Aldridge stood outside a small house with a white picket fence, the kind of place men went to forget wars. He knocked. Elias Brennan opened the door, 50 years old but looked 70, thin, hollow eyes. The smell of whiskey came with him. Hawk, no emotion in the voice. Long way from home. Heard you weren't doing well, Eli. Brennan laughed, no humor. Define well. I'm breathing. That counts for something. They sat on the porch. Brennan poured bourbon into 2 glasses. His hands shook. You still see them? Aldridge asked. Every day, every night. Men in the water, the fire spreading, their screams. Brennan drank. I saved 20 men that day, Hawk. 20 men in that lifeboat I didn't shoot. But I see the thousands I helped kill. You did the right thing? Did I? Some of those men I saved probably made it to Ley, probably fought our Marines, probably killed Americans because I couldn't pull the trigger. He refilled his glass. Morrison was right. Soft hearts lose wars. Morrison died hating what he built. That doesn't sound like winning to me. Morrison's dead? 2 weeks ago, heart attack. Brennan was quiet for a long time. Did he ever find peace with it? I don't think so. I think he carried those ghosts until they killed him. Then we're all dead men walking. Brennan stared at his glass. Some of us just haven't stopped moving yet. Eli, I can't fly anymore, Hawk. Can't even look at planes without my hands shaking. Can't hear thunder without diving for cover. Can't close my eyes without seeing fire. He looked at Aldridge. The doctors say combat fatigue. I say I saw what we're capable of when we stop being human, and I can't unknow it. You stayed human longer than most of us. And look where it got me. Brennan gestured at the bottle. 42 years old, and drinking myself to death because I can't forget men I helped murder. You saved 20, that counts. Does it? Does 20 saved balance against 3,000 killed? Is that good math? Aldridge had no answer. Go home, Hawk, Brennan said quietly. You carried the weight better than me. Some of us just broke under it. Aldridge left the next morning. 3 months later, Elias Brennan died in his sleep, liver failure, the official cause. But Aldridge knew the truth. Brennan had died on March the 3rd, 1943. It just took 10 years for his body to realize it. The funeral was small. Aldridge was one of only 6 people there. No military honors. Brennan had requested none. On the headstone, Brennan had left instructions for a single line. He chose mercy. The war never forgave him. Bismarck. Sea Memorial, Papua New Guinea. March 3rd, 1955. 12 years after the battle, Garrett Aldridge stood at the edge of a cliff and looked down at the ocean. Calm today. Blue. Beautiful. No hint of the fire and blood it had held 12 years ago. The memorial was small, forgotten by most. A simple stone marker overlooking the sea. Bronze plaque with dates and names. In memory of all who died here, March 3rd, 1943, Japanese and Allied, may we learn that innovation without wisdom is just elegant killing. Aldridge recognized the last sentence, Morrison's words, added by someone after his death, perfect epitaph for a weapon that had worked exactly as designed. He placed 2 wreaths at the memorial base, one for the Allied dead, one for the Japanese. "Excuse me?" The voice came from behind, accented English, elderly. Aldridge turned. An old Japanese man stood there, 70s maybe, thin, grey hair, walking with a cane, but his eyes were sharp, familiar somehow. "You are American?" the man asked. "Yes." "You were here, the battle?" Aldridge hesitated, then nodded. "I was a pilot. B25. The man studied him. Recognition flickered across his face. "I was here too. Sailor. Destroyer Asagiri." He stepped closer. "I am Toshiro Yamada. I pull men from water that day. Many men. Some live. Most die." Aldridge's breath caught. The young sailor, the one he'd seen pulling bodies from burning oil, the one who had looked up and made eye contact. "I remember you," Aldridge said quietly. "You were pulling survivors. I saw you from my plane." Yamada nodded slowly. "I remember plane, flying low. I think you will shoot, but you fly away." "I couldn't, not after I saw what you were doing." They stood in silence. 2 old men who had been young men on opposite sides of hell. "Many friends die that day," Yamada said finally. "Admiral Kurokawa, Captain Saito, many sailors, good men, following orders, doing duty. I'm sorry, I killed your friends." Yamada shook his head. "You do your duty, I do mine. We both try to survive." He paused. "War is not about right or wrong. Is about who adapt faster." That's what Admiral Kurokawa learned too late. "You know about Admiral?" I read his diary, salvaged after the battle. He understood in the end. That innovation had defeated tradition. That we won because we dared to change. Yamada was quiet for a moment. "After Bismarck Sea, Japan stopped sending big convoy. Too afraid of your gun planes. Many of my friends never sent to die because your weapon was too terrible to risk." He looked at Aldridge. "You saved Japanese lives too. Strange way. Make weapons so horrible we afraid to fight." Aldridge hadn't thought of it that way. "The man who designed the weapon," he said, "he died last year, carried the guilt his whole life." "He should not feel only guilt," Yamada said. "He change war, make it more efficient, yes, but also show us that we must change too, must adapt, must not trust old ways blindly." He tapped his chest. "I carry ghosts from that day. Admiral, Captain, sailors I could not save, but I also carry lesson. That certainty kills faster than bullets. You carry ghosts too? Every day, every night." Yamada smiled sadly. "But ghosts make us remember, make us human. Better to carry ghosts than to forget." They stood together, looking out at the calm sea. What did you do after the war? Aldridge asked. I become teacher, teach young people about war, about change, about not trusting tradition too much. Yamada paused. I tell them story of Bismarck Sea, not about shame, about evolution, about learning. What do they say? They ask, who was right, America or Japan? What do you tell them? I tell them both sides were right, and both were wrong. America right to innovate, Japan right to honor tradition. But America wrong to kill so efficiently, Japan wrong to trust tradition so blindly. He looked at Aldridge. War has no right answer, only survivors who learn, and ghosts who teach. Aldridge pulled a small object from his pocket, Morrison's old welding goggles, the ones he'd worn while building the first gunship. He placed them at the base of the memorial. For the man who changed everything, he said quietly, and spent the rest of his life wishing he hadn't. Yamada nodded, pulled a small object from his own pocket, a brass button from a Japanese naval uniform, placed it next to the goggles. For Admiral Kurokawa, who learned truth too late. But learned. The two objects sat side by side at the memorial base, symbols of two men who had believed in different things, but who had both paid the price for certainty. Will you come again? Yamada asked. Next year? Yes, Aldridge said, if I'm alive. Then I see you here, same day. We remember together. They shook hands. Two old men who should have been enemies, who had been enemies, but who had both learned the same lesson written in blood across these waters, that evolution wins. But survivors carry the cost. Garrett Aldridge returned to the Bismarck Sea Memorial every year until his death in 1968. Toshiro Yamada did the same until 1972. For those years, they met on March 3rd. Two old men standing at a cliff, placing wreaths, sharing silence. When Aldridge died, Yamada added a small American flag to the memorial. When Yamada died, Aldridge's son, who had never known about his father's yearly pilgrimage, received a letter. It read, "Your father and I were enemies once. We killed each other's friends. We fought for different beliefs, but we both learned the same lesson. That war has no winners, only survivors, and survivors remember. Tell the next generation innovation is necessary, tradition is valuable, but neither should be trusted absolutely. The moment you stop questioning, you stop evolving, and evolution always wins, but evolution doesn't care about souls, only survivors do." Toshiro Yamada. The Bismarck Sea Memorial still stands today, small, forgotten by most tourists, but every March 3rd, someone places wreaths there. Descendants of men who fought, historians who study, veterans who remember. The bronze plaque remains, in memory of all who died here, March 3rd, 1943. Japanese and Allied, may we learn that innovation without wisdom is just elegant killing. And at the base, protected by glass, sit two objects, a pair of welding goggles, a brass naval button, symbols of two men who believed different things, who died believing they were right, but who both learned too late that certainty is the most dangerous weapon of all. The Bismarck Sea is calm today, but beneath those waves lie lessons written in blood, lessons that survivors carry, and ghosts that never forget.